Hey everybody, welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Alicia Elizabeth and I'm so excited that you've decided to join me here today. If you are a first-time viewer, I want to encourage you to subscribe after you've watched this video and enjoyed the content. If you are a returning viewer, aka a returning subscriber, hey boo, hey. I'm so happy to have both of you here. Grab a snack, get comfortable. We have some really good things to talk about. Before we dive into our topic, let's get into this hairstyle. I worked out today and my hair was like drenched and I was like, I need to dry it. So it's been drying this way and I said, I kind of like this style. So here we are. So if you're like, what's going on with her hair? Understand this was very intentional. I think it's kind of cute. It's like curly right here. Okay, let's get into today's topic. We are unpacking 13 things mentally strong people don't do by Amy Morin. And if you missed the first couple videos for this series, the link is provided below. But the last thing we talked about is self-pity. I want to just put a disclaimer out there that the goal of this series, just like the gifts of imperfection, is to provide a space for us to discuss the information provided in this book, in addition to myself sharing and providing application to what I'm reading to make all of this information make sense. And so sometimes videos will be shorter than others. Sometimes we can like kind of jog through it, and sometimes we have to kind of like pace ourselves because the information is just so heavy and rich and it's not to be breezed upon. And so self-pity, I think, is one of the topics that, based on views and the feedback people gave me in my inbox, based on the clips that I've posted, it's very cringy. We don't want to discuss self-pity because it literally is putting a name to a behavior we have but don't want to call it. And so the definition to self-pity is excessive, self-absorbed unhappiness over one's own trouble. And what's so problematic about this is I would be doing you a disservice if I shortchanged what that looks like. And so if in the last video, when I gave you a series of are you this person, if something in you was uncomfortable, something rose in you, something didn't want to hear it, I want to challenge you to lean into that. Matter of fact, go ahead and immerse yourself into it, because the only way real change will ever happen in our lives is if we can see our behavior for what it is, have a term or a word or a name for it, and then we can address it accordingly. So what do you mean by that, Alicia? Don't call me, I don't even know. Please don't argue this. This is just an example off the top of my head. Don't call me big boned as if that is a compliment when I need you to address the fact that I'm overweight. Because not calling a thing what it is delays me in addressing it. So, self-pity part 2. Amy does a great job of telling us the problem with feeling sorry for ourselves, and then, I'm looking at my notes, and then how to stop feeling sorry for ourselves. And at first I was just gonna go to the next point, but the reality is it's not enough to just have the name for our behavior. We need to understand the problem behind the behavior and the steps to change it, or at least have some of the steps that we could start to utilize or tap into in order to change that behavior. And so the first thing that really stood out to me from her book is, one of the problems with feeling sorry for yourselves is that as long as you feel sorry for yourself, she says, you can delay any circumstances that will bring you face to face with your real fears. And you can avoid taking any responsibility for your actions. Whew. Feeling sorry for yourself can buy time. Instead of taking action or moving forward, exaggerating how bad your situation is justifies why you shouldn't do anything. That is so good. So the first problem with self-pity is that it literally delays any circumstances that will bring you face to face with your fears. What does that look like? It looks like, woe is me. My family is a family of dysfunction. And instead of getting to the root of the dysfunction, I want to spend more time talking about the dysfunction. The more time I spend talking about the dysfunction, the more time I'm not in counseling. The more time I can't address my mom and my dad for the areas they dropped the ball. The more time I don't hold responsibility for my participation in this now generational dysfunction. Self-pity excuses you. It gets you out of the way of being solution-oriented. She says, and you can avoid taking responsibility for your actions. It buys you time. When we choose to harp on the side effects of a thing. Okay? The second thing that she says that I love is that feeling sorry for yourself is self-destructive. Isn't that interesting? Self-pity is you paying a ton of attention to what's going wrong in your life. And it does the very thing that you're experiencing. It is self-destructive. Woo! This is good. It leads to new problems and can have serious consequences in your life. And that makes sense because using the example I just gave you, going back to the family dysfunction, is that I don't even win spending more time complaining about my family than I do finding solutions for my family, or even being solution oriented for the family I'm going to birth, right? So maybe my family is dysfunction, a ton of dysfunction, has a lot of underlying issues, but instead of spending so much time, instead of being solution oriented and actually saying, okay, this is how my family dynamic is going to run, this is how my household is going to run, I'm going to spend more time complaining about what already happened, what has already taken place. Blame, blame, blame. It's self-destructive because then you just birth a new family with the same problems because they never were addressed. Okay? So then let's talk about how to stop feeling sorry for ourselves. How, Alicia, I hear what you're saying. It's me. Ouch. How do I stop the self-pity? I'm glad you asked. Oh, well, actually, let me back up real quick. Some of the other reasons for the problems with self-pity is that it's a waste of time. It leads to more negative emotions. It can become a self-fulfilling prophecy. What is that? Feelings of self-pity can lead to living a pitiful life. When you feel sorry for yourself, she says, it's unlikely that you'll perform at your best. As a result, you may experience more problems and increased failures, which will breed more feelings of self-pity. So as a teacher who was also a student, this is true. When my students, and when I was a student, make up in our mind that this class is a fail, I'm not going to pass it, right? Naturally, everything in your body gets on board with that. I'm a witness for this. I've seen students who made up in their mind that because they failed a test, they're done for the quarter. And even if the calculations say you're losing, self-pity says, I don't need to ask for help. I don't need to advocate for myself. I don't need to inquire if there's things I can do. I'm just going to take this L. And so it fulfills the prophecy of what you've already declared. It also prevents you from dealing with other emotions. I like this one. Self-pity gets in the way of dealing with grief, sadness, anger, and other emotions. It can stall your progress from healing and moving forward because self-pity keeps the focus on why things should be different rather than accepting the situation for what it is. Woo! Yeah. Self-pity prevents you from actually going through the grieving process because you're focusing on why things should be different. Oh, this is so good. Self-pity says, let's focus on this makes no sense. I'm going to spend so much time saying this makes no sense. This should look this way. It almost messes up your reality because you're telling me how things should be and you're not getting on board with the fact that that's just not how it's going to be. That's not what's happening. And so you're not grieving. You're not experiencing sadness, anger, or grief. And it's almost delusional because that means you never get on board with how things are going. So her point is, it prevents you from dealing with other emotions. It causes you to overlook the good in your life. And it interferes with relationships. This is one that I am sure a lot of people don't want to hear, but I like it. Self-pity interferes with relationships. So we just had this amazing series for the Gifts of Imperfection, and we talk about vulnerability, right? And I don't want you to mistake these two different texts and misconstrue what you should take from it. I still believe in being vulnerable and sharing with your community and your people what's going on, and being honest and owning where you are, owning where you need help, owning what's happening, what has happened, things of that sort. But I do like that Amy says that self-pity can interfere with relationships, because she goes on to say a victim mentality is not an attractive characteristic. And so when I was reading this, y'all, I'm like, ugh, don't know if I want to repeat this. But you need that friend in your life sometimes that will tell you something that does not feel good to hear. Like, you just need it. I'm not saying we need it excessively, and I'm not saying we want friends who lie, but sometimes you need somebody to just say, your breath stinks. Don't sugarcoat it. Don't tell me it smells like dinner from last night. It smells like garlic. Your breath stinks. Period. And so a victim mentality is not an attractive characteristic. It's so hard to chew and so hard to swallow. Complaining about how bad your life is will likely wear on people rather quickly. No one ever says, what I really like about her is the fact that she always feels sorry for herself. And so, ouch. All right. Let's talk about things that you can do to stop feeling sorry for yourself. And then we're going to wrap this up. So she says, to alleviate feelings of self-pity, you need to change your behavior and forbid yourself from indulging in pitiful thoughts. So when I read this, the nurturer in me was like, that's so insensitive. That's so insensitive. Why would you tell someone that they need to forbid themselves from indulging in pitiful thoughts and that they need to change their pitiful behavior? And then I sat with it from a more mature lens, and I said, you know what? Sometimes, most times, when you want to change your behavior, it is extreme like that. You almost have to tell yourself, like, once you acknowledge what's happening, you have to go ahead and say, like, okay, this is what I'm going to do. So me inviting you all into my space, when going through a breakup, right? Self-pity is the leading emotion that I would have when I was younger. I was that girlfriend. I'd be like, this just should not be. It just doesn't make sense. And I understand by reading this how much time I prevented myself or missed in grieving and moving on, because I could not wrap my mind around, why is this the way it is, right? It didn't make sense. And so I love that she says change your pitiful behaviors, because your pitiful behaviors encourage self-pity. In addition, changing your thoughts. So once you get on board with the fact that, okay, we are no longer together, my behavior and my thoughts need to line up with this truth. If those two things are not lined up, I will continue to experience tension in my reality and my perception. I hope this is making sense. And so someone who wants to be coddled doesn't want to hear that. But someone who's really ready to get rid of this behavior understands that it is a decision, that my behavior and my thoughts have to come into alignment with what it is. And I have to declare and decree, both in my thoughts and in my behavior, that I won't be pitiful about this anymore, that I won't maneuver with self-pity, but instead I will grieve, I will go through the motions, I will do what needs to be done to respond to the reality of what's going on in my life. And so she says, one of the first things she says, she talks about behave in a manner that makes it hard to feel sorry for yourself. She tells a story about how she lost her husband, and when his death anniversary came up, her and her family, she wanted to know, what are we gonna do? And I think the mom-in-law was like, let's go skydiving. And at first it took her aback, like, what? Like, we're grieving, but it's a year later. And the people around you who have also lost that loved one are grieving too, but that doesn't mean that we have to grieve year after year after year. We want to behave in a manner that makes it hard to feel sorry for yourself. And so the mother-in-law suggested, let's go skydiving, which turned into a day that could have been spent weeping. Instead, we're going to honor this person who was someone who lived radically and who would have loved to skydive. We're going to do this every year. And by way of doing this, we're creating fun, new, exciting, memorable memories that discourage being in a state of self-pity, but instead encourage creating positive memories. And so she says, our choice to spend the day doing something enjoyable isn't about ignoring our grief or masking our sadness. It's about making a conscious choice to celebrate life's gifts and refusing to behave in a pitiful manner. When you notice self-pity creeping into your life, make a conscious effort to do something contrary to how you feel. In addition, she says, volunteer to help a worthy cause, perform a random act of kindness, do something active. The key to changing your feelings is finding which behaviors will extinguish your feelings of self-pity. So those are just suggestions, but you have to figure out what will put out the self-pity feeling. What can you do? Not to avoid experiencing the array of emotions that come with the reality of your situation, but what can you do to not choose to, experience self-pity where you should be experiencing grief and sadness? So we're not replacing the emotion to avoid experiencing things. We are putting something there, but still experiencing the reality of it. Okay? She says, replace thoughts that encourage self-pity. She shares a story, Lord, about a car accident. And she says both men experienced the same event. However, their perception of the event was completely different. One man viewed himself as the victim of a horrible circumstance, while the other man viewed the event as good fortune. Their reaction was all about the difference in perception. And so she asked questions. In order to replace your thoughts of self-pity, you have to ask yourself certain things like, what's another way I could view my situation? Like, don't rush past that. When stuff is happening in your life, what is another way that you can view your situation? Like, pause the video and really ask yourself that. How else can I view what's going on in my life? Right? Just lost my job. Now I have an opportunity to pursue my passions. Just got a relationship. Now I have an opportunity to do things selfishly, to learn about myself more. I'm trying to think of things that happen. How else can you view your situation? What advice, second question she said you should ask is, what advice would I give to a loved one who has had this problem? What evidence do I have that I can get through this? Though replacing overly negative thoughts with more realistic ones takes practice and hard work, it is very effective in decreasing feelings of self-pity. She then goes on to say that you should exchange self-pity for gratitude. So keeping a gratitude journal, saying what you're grateful for. Change the channel when you're experiencing self-pity. Ask others what they're grateful for. Teach kids to be grateful, okay? These are a few solutions to responding to and changing self-pity as your behavior. If you struggle with self-pity, there's a name for it. It's out there. I'm telling you it. It's time to research it, address it, call it what it is. If you're not sure if you're the person who experiences self-pity, I would encourage you to ask your friends and give them a disclaimer like, hey, I'm going to ask you a question. It's not going to be the easiest to hear your answer, but I really need you to be honest with me. Do I maneuver in self-pity more often than not? And in what areas? They may say every area, or they may just say whenever a guy and you break up, or a girl and you break up, or whenever you are low on funds. But get to the root of it so that your life can change, so that you can develop mental strength, This is not about appearing tough as much as this is about developing strength in this arena, in the battle up here. As always, thank you so much for watching. I do hope that you enjoyed this video. Please like, share, and subscribe. I appreciate you watching all the way through, and I will see you all in the next video. Bye.